Welcome back, Crew Cats. We are on for episode 2 of the Crew Corner podcast. My name is Matt.
And my name is AJ.
And there have been all sorts of fun news and events to cover here over the last couple weeks since the new year. I tell you, man, things have been moving fast since the new year, since that transfer window opened up.
It's exciting in a way that really we haven't had in a long time for Columbus. Admittedly, we haven't really done a huge rebuild since like 2007, 2008, and then 2012 and 13, where, essentially half the team was let go. I don't want to say fired, because fired just sounds mean. They were let go and were completely rebuilding the roster and everything around it.
Yeah, and I think what we're seeing now is we are really starting to see the Haslam money take effect.
I also think we're starting to see like the having a real team, not just, for all of the greatness that Greg was for the Crew and the playing style and, really developing an identity for the team. One of the faults that could be attributed to him is the fact that he was head coach and technical director. So he was making decisions regarding, who to bring in. There's a story that he flew to Brazil to arrange the Artur contract. He called in, he was the one that called in the favors that led to Pedro being brought in. It was him that convinced Justin Meram to come back to Columbus when he was in Orlando. He made the decision that led to Jossie coming to Columbus in exchange for Ola. Like, very much it was Greg makes decisions and then just sort of would tell Andy Lambo, who doesn't deserve a last name anymore, what he wanted to do with the team. So, having Pat, having Tim, having Caleb, and at the draft, I was at the draft party, and Tim and Pat both really attributed a lot of things to it, like having a full scouting department, having an assistant coach whose job it was to go to San Diego to go and watch our first round draft pick and see how he plays, how he fits in. And, it's very important to have those type of, that kind of committee aspect to it to ensure that we're making good decisions.
This offseason, and again, like we know why, is such a contrast compared to last offseason, because like you're finally seeing like what this front office can do in an offseason that is longer than 30 days.
Right.
When you actually have the time to put a plan together and formulate it, and most importantly, you've got Haslam money. They're not doing great with it up in Cleveland right now, but that's a whole nother story. Down here in Columbus, they look like they're spending smart, and they look like they are together, like they have a plan. It's all cohesive. So, you were at the draft party. How has that been compared to previous years?
In the past, the fans really, last year the league kind of as a way of, I don't want to say apologizing. Yeah, it was apologizing. Apologizing for what they put us through for 18 months. Took a busload of fans up to Chicago. I didn't go on that because I have, to work and can't take random days off in the middle of the week to go to Chicago for the United Soccer Coaches Convention, which is incidentally this weekend right now in Baltimore. This is the first year that the draft isn't at the Coaches Convention in a long time. I think the last time was still in the 90s, and it was, it was different. It was essentially just a giant conference call with everybody sort of being in their own home bases. So you had weird situations where you'd see clubs and they'd announce and they were at a bar, or they were at their training facility, and so it would cut to them, and they're being interviewed by somebody from ESPN, and they announce it, and they're standing in front of a blank wall. We had it in the Upper 90 Club, and so they cordoned off a little section with a conference table, and there was once again that committee I was talking about of coaches and front office, and they went down a list. They very much, as a player was taken that they wanted, they would cross it off. And that was more important than like the second round where we had those 2 picks, where they just had a list of like, oh, who's left? Okay, we'll take this person. I think it seemed like they always had like 1 or 2 that they were aiming at. But I think Barry was very much a goal. They had targeted that one. They sent an assistant coach to go watch him play at the end of the season, and Caleb. It was the head coach of San Diego was Caleb's coach when he was in college. It was somebody he's had a long relationship with. So when this head coach of San Diego calls him and says, hey, Caleb, I understand you need players, and I have this great player I think would work out in your system. You still play the same system that we taught you, so he plays under that same system. Maybe he'll work out for you. And I think Barry will work out. I don't know a tremendous amount of him because I wasn't paying attention to, the West Coast soccer teams.
What? You weren't following West Coast NCAA soccer?
There's too many teams.
There is a lot, and Barry and I talked a little bit about this during the news review. Was that it's becoming clear that Bez and Porter have a desire to. How's the best way to put it? They have a desire to see someone push Gyasi Zardes. Because Gyasi Zardes has not been pushed, really, since he got here.
And there were rumors in 2018, towards the end of the season, that there were people sniffing around for him. I don't know the truth of those, but Gyasi was the number 1 domestic goal scorer in 2018. As a result of that, in 2019, he triggered, a new contract. And when you get into that and you go, hey, I scored this many goals and had this many assists, and I was this important for you in 2018, I still am under contract to you. You have to pay me additional money. And that's a good agent. And it turned him into a designated player. He's one of the few American national team, and that's again his good form in 2018 led to him having a resurgence in 2019 in the national team, and he, is either depending on the game, he's either the number 1 choice for striker, or he's the number 2 choice for striker, based on the health of
Josie Altidore
yeah.
Yeah. The health of Josie Altidore at any given moment is a shot in the arm. Like, you have no idea what's going to come from it. Sometimes it'll be great. Sometimes it'll be terrible.
He's a very talented striker. He's huge, and that's, you kind of need that. You need that power. You need that speed, to use the colloquialism and the really weird, annoying commentator things whenever you talk about a African American player on the national team.
Yeah, there's always that weird bit too.
Strength.
I mean, it's one of those things where, like, what does this say about the status of U.S. strikers? Because
we don't have a lot that are playing in the domestic league at the top level.
We don't have a lot playing overseas that are regular starters.
Yeah, there was that whole garbage with Sebastian Soto earlier in the week where his form was so bad, his coach called him out in a press conference and was like, if you expect to play this way and be playing at full speed regularly, you are sadly mistaken. And which is bad because, everybody assumed after that great I think it was U17 performance he had a couple of years ago, that he was just going to, be the replacement for Altidore. But if he can't even get minutes in Germany, in the second division in Germany, even playing in their domestic cup, and playing well, then how the hell is he going to play Mexico? He's not going to be playing Mexico in the World Cup qualifier. He's not going to get called up to the national team for, Camp Cupcake in January or some garbage camp in March if he's not playing well.
What do you think that says about the state of U.S. soccer, where we just cannot put forwards together? For one reason or another, it's like we've got Christian Pulisic, Weston McKennie, and then...
Well, there was a whole thing with New York FC had some good ones, and then there was... a lot of it comes down to the structure that we've sort of put in place, where, NYCFC had a really great forward who was not getting minutes, and it was because he had a crappy attitude, and he was also on a Generation Adidas contract. So if you play him a certain number of minutes, he triggers an extra pay, and he goes against your salary cap. Well, if you don't want to pay that money to him because he's 18 or 19 years old and he's in his first contract, you don't play him. Well, okay, that doesn't allow a lot of development for him. So you should have probably sold him or loaned him out. That's one of the things. There's not too many players where you'll see a U.S. forward, who will go and develop well in a minor league setting in the U.S. You have to, basically we're having to assume that some of these German teams and French teams can be our development for, Tim Weah and Sebastian Soto and Julian Green and we've got half a dozen great forwards that are under 23, but they don't get real minutes. They don't get real development because they're a step below, whoever it is that's in front of them on the depth chart. So should they leave? Should Sebastian Soto continue to play in Europe if he's not going to get European minutes? No, he should probably come to MLS to go play. I think he played for Philadelphia's academy or Kansas or somebody. He was on somebody's academy.
Yeah, at this point it sounds like he needs to find his way back to America just to get minutes. As he's not going to develop if he is sitting on the bench in Dusseldorf or wherever he may be. Circling back to Miguel Berry though, so I mean, what we pulled from him, he's a 6'3", 180-pound, striker. He's a big dude. He's a big forward, and that's why, I think it's become obvious that between J.J. Williams and who's 6'4", 200, another big specimen, and now with Barry, it's becoming obvious, they want to push Zardes. Because Zardes, while he, comparatively speaking, did have a good year last year, I didn't see it play out nearly the same as we saw it in his final season under Berhalter. And I think part of it was just that no one was there to push him. No one was there challenging him for his spot. And we all saw it. It drives us insane. He's got his moments where he's damn near unstoppable. And then the rest of the time he finishes like a nerd on prom night. It's just off target after off target after off target. And we saw last year during that slump, as goes Giassi Zardes, so went the rest of the team.
He is a poaching striker, which is perfectly fine to get that last tap in. In hockey, he would be beloved. If he's, gets the second touch off of, a deflection and he puts it in, or he gets a moment where he's just in the correct position. And you'll see it there's a great moment in the national team one where he, during one of the games, during the Gold Cup, he ran near post and stopped and let the defender that was marking him keep going. And he stopped and a ball came directly to him and he essentially tapped it in, from 3 feet away, which is exactly what you want him to do. His job has seemingly never been a distant shooter. Now, is that what Zelarayan's job is going to be? Yeah, sure. But there's something to be said about what they're targeting. You can see it in J.J. Williams, in Barry. They're looking for a big, Barry and J.J. are both tall, large guys, so that they could be target strikers.
Yeah.
And we don't have a target striker. Adam John was a target striker, and he was useful in that position. And then he went to Phoenix and, incredibly, despite, 2 weeks ago we were talking about him, about how great it was that he was getting, a real shot in Phoenix. Well, he's getting a real shot in Atlanta now. Atlanta just picked him up and is paying Phoenix $100,000, which has never happened. I think that's double what the largest USL to MLS transfer where they paid a fee on a player is. And, does Atlanta need a target striker? Not really, because that's not their system. But he's a good striker.
He's a good person to bring. And ironically, I think Giassi would be great for this too. He is a good person to bring on in like that 70th minute when you're either level or down one, and you need someone big and fast who can put that ball on net. And that's what I liked about Barry. I saw Barry had like a 50% shot on target rate. Yeah. So like when he's in game, he's just putting the ball on net, and
he shoots. He's a shooter, and that can be good.
Yeah, he can create his own shot too, from what I could see. And I think the best part about this offseason, and we've still got till about February 12th before
midway through February,
is that the Crew do not look like they're finished. They don't look like they're finished with their offseason moves at all. I mean, they were linked to the kid from Vitorul. I hope I'm saying that right. Who wound up signing with another club, but they're also looking at Carlos De Pena from Dynamo Kiev.
That's actually true, though.
You don't think that one's true?
If it is true, it's good, but it seems like we shouldn't. We have so many midfielders.
Yeah, he does play as a winger though. And I'm like, we need wingers.
Yeah, but
we need depth at the wing. When in the Crew corner, one of the comments had said like, you'd kind of like tapering. I was like, I'm actually very excited about our lineup. It's like I'm excited about our lineup too. Our starting 11 is looking really good. It's just that I have so much injury PTSD from last season. It's like it's going to happen. People are going to get hurt. It's a game. People are going to get hurt.
If we sign everybody that we've drafted to the first team, we have all 30. But I don't think we sign all of the draft picks. It's one of those things where you draft players and maybe you send them. There's so many times where you don't ever sign these kids. And they can, with soccer, I think they can actually go back to school after being drafted if they're not given a professional contract. I'm not completely sure on that. And some of them, they just never get picked up by the senior team, and so they end up on a USL team or an NASL team or whatever, or PS something, professional soccer.
Who else can baseball can do that too if you don't sign with the team, you can go back to school. I don't understand why all the leagues aren't, or why all college sports aren't allowed to do that. Like,
it's money. I mean, like you think about John Elway was signed by the Yankees twice, and he's a Hall of Fame football player. There's weird stuff like that. The day that John Elway was drafted in the NFL, somebody interviewed George Steinbrenner. And he rolled over and he looked at a depth chart for 4 years later, and he's like, "Oh no, I have him playing in center field, so I don't know." It's one of those weird things where it's all about money. Football makes money, baseball does not.
Yeah, and at this point in America, soccer does not either, which I guess
unless it's certain schools. Wake Forest makes a lot of money off of soccer. I think North Carolina makes a lot of money off of soccer. UCLA makes a lot of money off of soccer, and it always sort of has. I had cousins who lived in Southern California and Central California in the 90s, and when Siggy Schmidt was the UCLA coach and had those amazing teams with Frankie Haydock and all of these great players in the late 80s, early 90s. That was if you were a kid in that area and you played soccer, you wanted to go play for Siggy at UCLA. UCLA has a garbage football team. They have a pretty good basketball team, but their money comes from soccer.
Interesting. And the other big one is Indiana University, my mother's alma mater, and I am reminded of that one constantly. And that's where our boy Danny O'Rourke came from. That is where our newest homegrown signing made a little pit stop at too. The crew officially announced the signing of Aiden Morris yesterday.
I think, and our producer will look this up. I think Caleb also went to Indiana.
But yeah, I mean, Aiden seems like another good midfield signing, which when we covered it on the news review, we're kind of we're thin. We talked about it on the last podcast even that we don't have a lot of American midfielders.
Yeah,
we have Trapp.
And Trapp. Nagby.
Yeah, and Nagby. But once those
most of our players have green cards, though, which helps.
Once those cup matches are gonna kick in, we're gonna need more of them because you can't start.
We need wingers. We don't currently have a single winger on our roster who is American born. And that's a problem to some people. It's a problem if you don't want to waste all of your foreign-born player spots. Caleb went to Indiana University Bloomington. Thank you.
Yep, that is IU.
That is IU.
That is the IU.
But I don't think it's the Caleb factor that led to that one. I think it's the Danny O'Rourke factor. Danny O'Rourke is a legend. He was on legendary teams. He happens to be an assistant coach at IU. He also happens to be one of the innumerable former crew players who should have been called up as full coaches to various teams. Who we have a habit of producing coaches that are also or players that also have coaching licenses, and it should lead to more of them getting better professional gigs. But every once in a while you look out and you're like, oh, cool, Guillermo's the only former crew player that's a coach.
That's a coach now. I mean, at the MLS level, absolutely. I mean, and Danny, I've been familiar with Danny. I went to school with actually both of his younger sisters.
Yep.
His middle sister's the same age as me. I mean, I remember watching him play high school ball at Worthington Kilbourne. That gives you a hint of how old I am. And I was saying he was one of those guys where had the crew had an academy at that time, he probably would have been in it. Like he would have been an academy product. He's born and raised from Columbus.
Yeah.
Played at Worthington Kilbourne. He absolutely would have been an academy product had that option been available to him.
We have a great academy. Ohio is an incredible area for attracting talent. Caleb has said that on a number of times that when he was coaching in Akron, one of the most important parts of his job and kind of one of the luxuries is that Ohio, particularly Central Ohio, has a tremendous number of players, a tremendous number of academies, and just local kids that can play really well.
I remember when I was a kid, my parents put me in youth soccer, and I think it's one of those things where, like, at least in this state, when you're a new parent, you put your kid in soccer just to see if he's even got the skill.
Also to just get them away from you for a few
minutes. I'm pretty... The more and more I look back on it, the more and more I find that to be the case. But it was just all for me. I wound up settling on rock and roll. But yeah, I mean, I remember going through the gambit of sports, and soccer was the first youth sport they ever put me in.
Because it's easy. It's 22 kids chase a ball, or 10. It should really be 5-on-5 at anything under the age of 12. If it's not completely organized, you see these crazy games where it's like U8s and they're playing with full formations and defensive schemes, and it's like you're 8. Learn how to play soccer.
Yeah, it really is a coaching thing.
Yeah.
It really is a coaching thing, and I think a lot of that has to do with just the American sports mentality. Where it's like, what did Vince Lombardi say? First he said, winning isn't everything, it's the only thing.
Right.
And then he said, well, winning isn't everything, but the will to win is. I'm like, I guess that's a good switch as you get older, but, Urban Meyer's job at Ohio State was not to put quality players into the NFL, even though he did. His job was to win games.
Right.
That was his job. And even at the high school level, those coaches' job is to win games.
Yeah, and the tactic, because if you're coaching in college and you're coaching at a development academy U8, you take the same coaching thing. You get a B license in the U.S. And to the point where you hear people talk about how stupid the B license testing is, and right now, San Diego just started a USL team with Landon Donovan as their owner and head coach. And he's having to get his B licenses. And he was interviewed, and he said it's really stupid that half of the B license for him is learning how to deal with children's parents. Like, he is he's going to be a professional soccer coach, but he has to take tests on how to deal with parents and deal with explaining to parents, hey, your kid is good, or hey, your kid is garbage, please get them out of my academy. And it doesn't matter that he's coaching adults. He still has to take that. So there really should be a separation. You shouldn't be trying to teach 8-year-olds how to do, the Barcelona ticky-tacky ball and have 300 passes before a goal. You shouldn't be teaching 8-year-olds how to do that. You should be teaching 8-year-olds how to pass, how to shoot, how to not be mean to each other.
Which applies to a lot more than sports on that last one.
Right.
But yeah. I mean, the kids need touches. They
Right.
need to just get out and play the game. And yeah, and I think just going for youth soccer, say 8 and under, just keep it at 5-a-side.
Yeah.
You don't need that many people. You don't need a field that big.
I say teach them futsal.
Futsal, yeah, futsal's is actually the perfect example for that. And you're trying. It's the point of it is you're trying to do 2 completely different things.
Right.
Developing a quality skill and talent is a whole different method than winning a game.
Right.
It's a whole different aspect of the game. And we're putting these coaches in a position, particularly at the college, the high school and college level, where they're teaching them to win when in reality we should be teaching them how to play the game.
Right.
Because to me, I think the reason American football and proper football are the 2 most popular sports in the world at this point, throw in cricket too, are because the games are immensely complex.
Right.
It is a very difficult game for both of them to really process and understand the X's and O's aspect of the game. I've probably been a soccer fan now for going on 6 years when I've really sunk my teeth into it, and I still don't understand most of the X's and O's aspect of soccer.
Right. There's a couple of different sayings on that. Like Barcelona and Real Madrid have like styles, and then there's the Italian style, and then the Dutch total football from the Ajax academy system that came in when Johan Cruyff was a part of Ajax and part of the Dutch national team. But there's an old saying, and I said this to my wife last night regarding hockey and the difference between hockey and soccer. Soccer is simple. There's 16 rules, 22 men chase a ball for 90 minutes, and in the end, the Germans win. I did not create that saying. That is one of the oldest sayings in when it comes to football.
All I know is after Germany beat England in the World Cup, I don't think it was Churchill, but I'm going to say it was Churchill. It's like, I'm not upset that the Germans have beat us at our game. We've beaten them twice at theirs.
Right.
No, you didn't, Winston. The Americans did, but you helped.
Which is why the Germans, the English fans, whenever they played Germany, chant 2 World Wars and 1 World Cup, la-di-la-di-da-di. It is a little bit obnoxious, but at the same time, the thing is, when you're getting into the difference between European football and English football and American football, the reason that the Americans have never succeeded is because we have never really had a form beyond the typical pace and power. Our players are typically the fastest, the best conditioned, and it's because they're coming from a situation in which that is if you're good at playing soccer at any level, you train to play soccer at that level. In other parts of the country, other parts of the world, they just play. Brazil just plays. Neymar came from the streets playing 3-on-3 court ball, and there's no real rules other than win. And Brazil, very good because of that. The Netherlands, the Dutch football system has a way that's been copied because Ajax was very good in the 1970s and the 1980s. The French have their own system, and they won the World Cup as a result of it. They passed to a young player who outran everybody and who passed to a player who could outshoot everybody. That's a simple means of winning a game, but they developed tactics. The English had a terrible set of tactics through the 80s and 90s because it came from a really stupid decision that somebody did based on committee, where it was, okay, you need somebody who can kick it very long, and then they kick it very long right up the center, and then 2 strikers are in the front, and they try to score, and you win by scoring. And in the end, somebody finally sat down and said, hey, we haven't won in a long time, so perhaps this system sucks. And that's the thing that everybody kept hearing when in 2017 when we didn't qualify for the World Cup is the U.S. didn't have a system. So.
And in a way, we still don't. Like, Greg Berhalter, God love him, but I still don't see what the plan is.
His plan is he needs players that are very, very smart. And when people, sort of infamously, somebody tried to do a gotcha question when he was announced as the head coach of the national team. They said, how do you expect to deal with coaching players that speak Spanish? And he very dryly said, I coach players who speak Spanish on the crew. And it's because he did. And what they weren't paying attention to is 2 weeks before he'd been announced, he'd been in Spain at, a conference run by, I think it was Real Madrid giving a conference on possession-based football in Spanish. Like, when he can coach and he can do everything on a very Manchester City possession system. That's sort of what he wants to play, where you have a bunch of passes leading towards, pulling the opposition to one side, and then you pass it to the other side, and you drive it right up into the goal, and you win. That's how he did it in 2018. That's how he did it in 2017. That's how he did it in 2015.
As I'm looking back on it, I'm like, is this the world's smallest, or not smallest, the world's biggest and slowest game of give and go, basically?
Yeah. Well, that's how he did it. I mean, you look at 2015, he quite literally, the game plan was pass it up to Justin Meram. Justin Meram crosses it in to Kai Kamara, and Kai Kamara scores the goal. 2016, that didn't work because Kai and people were fighting. 2017, he did that again, and it was pass the ball up to Justin Meram, who passes it to Pipa, who passes it to Ola Kamara, and Ola scores a goal. That's how you get it. That's how you hold Atlanta off in 2017. So now having Caleb in 2019, and we go, okay, how is Caleb going to run this? Is he going to run it like Greg's system? Well, Caleb, his possession is right up the sides instead of, doing a million passes to then lead to Justin Meram crossing it in to somebody who scores a goal. It's everybody needs to play at the top of their game. We do set pieces now. We do, we're driving off the corners. Yeah. Well, we won the first 3 games we won last season were as a result of Gaston Saro or Josh Williams heading a ball in. Like, there's off of a corner kick. Like, that shouldn't be how you win a game. But it was, and I'm kind of okay with that.
I don't know. I think that there is, and I kind of garnered this from watching the Titans-Ravens game from a couple weeks ago, is that the National Football League has become so like pass happy that their entire the model of the game now is to like throw the ball deep and rush on offense and rush the passer on defense.
Yeah.
Or have like that run, or having the run pass option as well. But basically, it's throw the ball on offense and rush the passer on defense. Meanwhile, the Tennessee Titans are like, screw all of that.
Right.
We're going to run the ball, and we're going to run the ball down your throat. We're still going to rush the passer, but we're going to stop the run too. And then we'll hit you over the head with the play action. And that used to be the norm in the game. It used to be if you could run the ball and stop the run, you were going to be a 500 team at worst.
Right.
And now they're the only team doing that, and nobody else is equipped to deal with it.
Yeah.
And I think we've yet to see, and I think this style would actually work well in the United States, and I can't believe I'm bringing up this name, but it's like the Tony Pulis style of football, where you play hard-nosed defense, you get the ball up there, you fire them from outside the box from wherever, you see, hope it goes off, hope it deflects off someone, you get a corner and you nick one off of a set piece.
And I think work for certain teams that are set up with really strong center backs.
Which right now this team has.
But what we also have is when he's in top form, and we obviously haven't seen him play in 16 months. Milton Valenzuela can be, one of the top outside backs in the league. So you can let somebody who, hopefully he hasn't lost. Oh my God! Please tell me he hasn't lost a step on as a result of surgery.
I would hope at 19 years of age he would have not lost a step in his recovery. I mean, in your opinion, do you see the Crew competing for the Supporters' Shield this year? Do they have that kind of talent?
I want to say yes, but
don't we all?
There are so many good. LAFC is still so good, and unlike every other team, Atlanta has somehow jettisoned half their team, and they're going to attempt to just completely rebuild in 3 weeks. they just lost Pures to Mexico, and the same day they also cut Justin Miram, and so they're sitting on like 3 players that are of any real good. And somebody's gonna yell at me or tweet me later like Atlanta has blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that they don't really have. They have P.T. Martinez, he's the greatest South American. He was garbage last season. Don't pretend like he's an incredible player. He was good for half the games. But in reality,
for $14 million, he was good for half the games.
He's half the games. I think they, depending on how some things work out, the unbalanced schedule will help us a little. They don't have the Galaxy or LAFC, so if
at all,
yeah, they don't play them at all.
Wow.
I don't think we have any of the California teams. I don't think we have San Jose either. There's 3 West Coast teams that we don't play. And I feel bad for Nashville because every away game for them is like a 6-hour flight.
Welcome to the league.
Yeah. And it's an unbalanced schedule anyways because we play 2 games for the East teams and then 1 game for the West. And so, like, when we play Dallas, we're playing in Dallas because last year we played in Columbus, which is okay. That's how you're getting the Portland game. We're going back to Portland. Like, that is our only real big, crazy West Coast game is we're going back to Portland. And those type of games will be what decides whether or not we're a Shield contender. Because there are some Eastern Conference teams that are straight up garbage.
Yeah, the East seems weak.
The East seems weak
this year.
Those are the things that lead to teams suddenly being great. Like, there have been teams in the past where you're like, oh, this is garbage. Toronto a couple of years ago, had 2 great players and the rest of their team was garbage. And somehow they won the treble. And which is just upsetting because they won the Shield and the Cup over us. And we had a team that should have won everything. And admittedly, this last year, the Crew, I looked at some of during our 13-game losing stretch, we lost a lot of those games by a last-minute goal or a simple situation. Am I saying that, if Awful doesn't break his jaw for those 6 games he misses, we automatically win them? No, but if we tied them, we're in the playoffs. If we tied half of them, we're in the playoffs. If we won half of those games, we're in the playoffs. If we, there was 2 games that we lost in like the 93rd minute that turned into ties. If those are wins, we're in the playoffs. And Atlanta is not.
Like we dropped so many
that were stupid,
unnecessary points just at the last minute and like that's kind of what has me excited about this season is because we've definitely upgraded the talent. Like,
right.
God bless Pipa, but a 35-year-old number 10 when you replace him with a 27-year-old number 10 who
should be an upgrade.
That should be an upgrade, which you paid welcome to the new man, Mr. Zelarayan, here earlier this week.
He is very Argentinian. And somebody said he kissed her on the cheek, and she's like, whoa, it's flu season around here. Don't do that. So he seems like he can deal with the whole situation well. I felt a little bit bad halfway through because we were singing Wise Men, and it was being translated by one of the Crew sales
people
for him, because I don't think we have a full-time interpreter for the Crew because most of the players learn English pretty quickly, or they had the luxury of having Pipa and his 4. I think Pipa spoke 4 languages. There's infamously a moment that I've heard about where Caleb yelled at one of the players who speaks Portuguese, and Pipa yelled at them almost immediately afterwards in Portuguese. And there were reporters on the sideline that kind of looked around and were like, did you know that people spoke Portuguese? No, did you? No.
Nope, nope. It's an interesting game when you start bringing. I've always wondered like how they get these players who English is clearly not their first language. And I know somehow in America we've gotten it into our heads that like, oh, English is the second language for the rest of the world, and everyone in the world knows how to speak English. I've been to Europe. I can assure you, they don't.
There are
They
some places that
they like by and large. I was in Italy, and by and large, the vibe I got from the English language in Italy was like they know English the way like most of us know Spanish.
where it's like
It's about to that level. Like we can ask where the bathroom is. We can ask how to find a taxi. If you dropped us in the middle of somewhere, we could kind of waddle our way out of it. But that's about it. That's the general consensus of English on the European continent.
And that is one of the odd things, and it's a cultural thing that I'm not sure about when it comes to Lucas. Lucas is very Argentinian. His Spanish is very Argentinian too. Luckily, I keep forgetting. I think his name's Carlos, who works in the sales for the crew. And if I'm right, shout out to Carlos on that one. Who I think he's Colombian or Venezuelan, which is closer in Spanish to Spain or Mexico. But there is a difference in the language. There's a culture. There's a sound. My wife majored in Spanish linguistics, and it's almost a different language between Argentinian Spanish and Mexican Spanish. So we have a fairly decent Mexican fan base, and it's one of those things that I've kind of always been upset by. We have had more players come from New Zealand than we've had players come from Mexico.
How much of that do you think, though, is just nativism and wanting to stay in Liga MX?
I think that's nativism. But at the same time, they push for Latino Heritage Month, and it's always tacos and Corona sponsors Hispanic Heritage Night. Well, we have a very different Hispanic culture. DC United calls their Hispanic fan group Barra Brava. That is a Barra Brava in South America is a very different thing, and it can culturally be a very good altruistic, very.
So what is a Barra Brava?
It's basically a supporters group, but in certain parts of South America, a Barra Brava is also a street gang. It borders on organized crime every once in a while, and you get into these situations where ultras in certain places, South America, Argentina particularly, where Zelarayan's coming from. There's a fairly infamous story if you listen to the Cup podcast that J.D. Smith did for the 2008 MLS Cup winning crew team. That Schelotto, when he came from Boca to Columbus, he didn't hire babysitters. He brought family members in to watch his kids, people he could trust, and he made sure that he could trust those family members, because when he was playing on Boca, River fans or other teams' fans would kidnap family members and hold them ransom, throw this game. And it didn't happen to him, but those are always the stories in Argentina or Colombia, where you get these supporters groups that are little better than street gangs, and for some groups, luckily the DC United Barra Brava people are fairly good people. They're not a problem.
They're not the Proud Boys in NYFC or
that. Well, the Proud Boys are a separate.
That's a whole nother.
That's a whole national organization. But no, like there have been other the big fight that Chicago Fire had with Nelson Rodriguez and the Mexican supporters in Chicago, the Sector Latino. He banned the hell out of all of them because they got into fist fights with security people. And they were being profiled and disrespected and it led to a gigantic rift that involved a lawsuit for police officers and brandishing of weapons and resisting arrest, and they cleared a whole section for a season. Our Latino organization has been the longest running of all of our groups. It's been continuous since 2007, where other groups have fallen off. Crew Union has survived, Hudson Street Hooligans have survived, but all of those have survived essentially since the formation around the time that Siggy came in 2007 and 2008. And
Hudson Street Hooligans just straight up sounds like a street gang.
And that led to a fairly infamous moment.
I'm sure that's why they picked the name, but
well, no,
it just sounds.
The three people that founded it walked down Hudson Street to get to the game. They lived in like an apartment over by campus, and it was right off of Hudson Street, and so they walked down Hudson Street to get to the game. As a result, it has led to, when West Ham came, they formed the same time in 2008 when West Ham came as an international friendly, and their largest supporters group, their firm, was the basis for a fantastic movie called Green Street Hooligans or Green Street Elite or Hooligans, depending on what country you view it in. Directed and written by an amazing writer and director named Lexi Alexander. And it stars Elijah Wood and Chris Hunnam.
And Charlie Hunnam.
No, Charlie Hunnam, that's what his name is. And they accused the Hudson Street Hooligans of ripping off the name from the Green Street Hooligans. And it's, from everything I've ever learned about it, it's not that. But at the same time, it was a interestingly chosen name at that time.
It is. I don't know. I mean, I think there is a certain... Jim Rome used to say, and this is, I still don't think he's a soccer fan to this day. It's like, he also always said, soccer is not a sport, it is a reason to riot.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, even if they don't actually agree, even if they don't believe that to be true, they like the mystique and the fantasy and everything that goes in behind it. And it just kind of gives it a cool name. It gives you kind of that, also kind of like that punk rock and roll, right, that rock and roll edge to it. And you definitely see that coming through in crew games. I mean, when you get to the Nordic and they're holding up some of those tifos, I mean, it is some badass stuff they are bringing up there. It is meant to have an edge. It is meant to be intimidating. And yeah, there are always, when you do that, there's always going to be people who take that seriously, right, rather than understanding that it's part of the game. I just watched Joker on Saturday, so I'm still coming off of that.
Joker
that
and
moment.
Fight Club are two movies that I've always worried that too many people emulate. That they see it as like, oh, I'm a disenfranchised person, I should burn down a city or cause a riot, and you could do that without causing mass hysteria and killing people. Like there's the guy in Colorado who shot up a movie theater because he was trying to emulate the Joker, and it was the premiere night of Dark Knight.
James Holmes,
and that type of behavior. One of my favorite sayings is, do whatever you want as long as you don't impede somebody else's ability to do whatever they want.
And as we're getting further and further into it, we're finding out that is, I don't know, everything.
Right.
But we're redrawing our boundaries, we're redrawing our lines, we're trying to figure out stuff out. I can promise you this, if you haven't watched Joker yet, one, watch that movie, absorb its meaning, and then come talk to us about it, because everybody who's ever seen this movie loves to talk about this movie. Right. And two, after you watch Joker, under no circumstances watch The Dark Knight after that. Don't do it. It's not a smart idea. You will not like Batman after that.
I say watch Joker and then immediately go watch the 1966 Batman series. Because then you immediately start thinking of... Because if you're thinking of Joaquin Phoenix and then Cesar Romero, man who wouldn't even shave his mustache off to play the Joker. They just painted his mustache white, and then he fought Batman in a surfing contest and wore a tuxedo jacket and Bermuda shorts. That is the Joker and Batman relationship that I prefer.
So I will say this: watching the two back to back.
Yeah.
One, you can clearly tell Todd Phillips just took a lot of influence from Heath Ledger's Joker, and then the costume and set designers took a lot of influence from Heath Ledger's Joker. Because they basically, when you watch them back to back, they are clearly a younger and older version of the exact same character.
Well, it's also the comedian and taxi driver mixed together.
Yeah.
And so much so that they just have, they lean into it and have, Robert
De Niro.
Just De Niro playing the talk show host.
Yeah, and the other thing I really picked up on it was, one, after watching The Dark Knight, I'm like, man, Batman's a dick.
Yeah.
Batman's really a dick. And it completely turned over my opinion on what I feel is actually a very important question as you get to know someone, which I actually don't know for you. Is Batman a superhero?
Batman is a failure of somebody to help a child through a gigantic trauma. There was a proposed comic book that Kevin Smith and Mark Bernard were supposed to do that was called Alfred. And it came really close to being made, and it was going to be like a 4-part series where it's Alfred, it's all through Alfred's eyes. And there is a great one that is through Alfred's eyes, where it kind of shows Alfred, the night that Batman first goes out, and he puts on the suit and he goes and he fights crime, and Alfred's at home by himself, basking in the I have failed this child. I have failed to help this child deal with the fact that his parents were gunned down in front of him. This child should never have gone away and been allowed to go and study with the League of Assassins in Japan. Dumont never should have been anywhere near him. Ra's al Ghul should never have been allowed near him. He should never have been able to fall into this system. And, Alfred was supposed to try to solve the situation. Ace the Bat Hound was found by Batman abused and tied up, and so Alfred is forced to solve this situation where Ace is like a stand-in for what Bruce should have been. He brings Ace back to health. He saves this dog, so this dog is not afraid of people anymore. And Batman is afraid of people. I don't honestly believe, and depending on who writes him, Grant Morrison essentially writes him as a person who's had severe trauma and is, dealing with it in his own way and doesn't particularly want to be alive. I'm not completely convinced everybody can do that. Scott Snyder doesn't do it in a particularly great way. He wanted to have Dick Grayson take over. And, my wife is indicating that it's a can of worms. Batman is a failure to deal with trauma in a way that, it was great when they killed Batman off for him to go and come back. And then there's a comic book series called The Battle for the Cowl, where all of the previous Robins and Damian Wayne, who was Robin at the time, and it's Batman's illegitimate son with Talia al Ghul, Ra's al Ghul's daughter. And the main villain, Dick Grayson, stops being Nightwing and he becomes Batman, which is sort of the position he was always meant to be. But when they write with Dick Grayson as Batman, his villains are not large and powerful. They're not the Joker. They're not the Penguin. They're not a mirror image of Batman, Bruce Wayne. They are because Dick is so outlandish, he's a circus performer. His main villain is a child that was severely abandoned and abused. It's James Gordon, his Commissioner Gordon's son, who is severely mentally traumatized and has, a dual personality where you think he's this angel and he's doing all these things, but he tortures people with no smile on his face, with a completely blank face. Batman is that. Batman is the child that should have gone to therapy.
So is he a superhero?
No.
I used to be in that category. Until last weekend, because I would say no. And then, of course, the counter argument is Batman has the world's only true superpower.
Money.
Money. He has super money.
Yeah.
And
Oliver Queen has super money, too.
Yeah. And I will say, after watching The Joker and then watching Dark Knight back to back, it flipped my opinion on that. I do believe Batman is a superhero. Do you know why that flipped?
Because he's goes beyond the situation the city places itself in.
Because superheroes aren't real.
Oh, well, yeah.
Bruce Wayne does not exist. That is not an actual... There is nobody who exists or ever has... He wants to be. He's not anywhere... He's close to being Tony Stark. He is nowhere near being Iron Man.
No, he's building bulletproof trucks, which is kind of funny to me. He has come to a point where he's like, no, the world is going to be a hellscape, and we will drive around in bulletproof trucks that you can put your dirt bike that is also bulletproof on,
and he's it. Like, he's as close as we get, and he's nowhere near the level of Bruce Wayne.
Right.
That person is a complete figment of everybody's imagination. He does not exist. He is not real. Remember that old documentary, Waiting for Superman? You could just as easily have said Waiting for Batman, because, again, this person is not walking through that door. He's not coming to save us.
And there are closer examples, like, it all depends on when you're coming into, like, superpowers versus situations that lead... Like, Oliver Queen doesn't have superpowers. He has a pile of money, but he also was stranded on a deserted island, and teaches himself how to shoot a bow and arrow. And, that's one of the things they did really well in the TV series on Oliver Queen, is they kind of put the idea of, like, you have to survive in the situation you put yourself in. And so now you have this tremendous amount of trauma, knowing that your family failed the city and doing all that. Like, Bruce Wayne comes at it from, like, my family was great for this city, I will continue to be great, even though the city is not good anymore. Oliver Queen's thing is my family failed this city, and I must atone for it.
It's a completely different mindset.
It's a different mindset.
When you go into
They're both very, very rich. And the person that I think would actually be the realist is Dr. Doom. Dr. Doom, I think, yes, he's a villain. He's not a hero.
That's actually kind of the point.
He makes a lot more sense. Where you go, okay, this person is from a former Soviet republic, and the greater government has destroyed his people's ability, so he will lead them through charisma. And why does he wear a mask? Well, it depends on who draws it. Like, somebody drew him in I think it was the 90s, where he's like, oh, I'm disfigured, and he takes his mask off, and there's like a half-inch scar on his cheek. And he's so vain because he's seeking perfection in the world. And that's just like a mental illness. It's not a...
Oh, there's plenty of those people out there.
Yeah.
There's plenty of billionaires out there like Victor Von Doom.
Right.
He is a much more plausible real-life character than Bruce Wayne ever could have been. And
I think Victor Von Doom also sees himself as the hero.
Oh, they all do.
Yeah.
They all do. All those people who, let's just say, they've got a lot of money, but they never ran for office.
Right.
That's what they do. They're like, I don't need to run for office. I have bags full of cash, and I can just rebuild the world in my image, the
And
way
that is
I
Lex
want it
Luthor.
to. Yeah.
That's Lex Luthor.
Also, much more of a plausible character than
President builds a nuclear-powered suit and tries to destroy the world. Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah. Like I can see a lot of rich people just are that fill on their egos. So we've gotten wildly off topic, but I hope we hope you have enjoyed all of that. And
I am a
there will-
gigantic comic book dork.
There
We
will-
could probably do a comic book podcast and a soccer podcast.
there'll certainly be more to come. But we've also, as we've seen, it is the 25th anniversary of the MLS, and they're trying to do a little bit of a red carpet rollout on this one. They've got
Well, it also coincided with an anniversary for Adidas, which is, I think it's Adidas' 100th anniversary or something. But they are going to release new jerseys at the Adidas fashion show, or the night before the Adidas fashion show at New York Fashion Week. They are going to release all new MLS jerseys. And the leaks that are coming out are sort of ugly. I sort of despise them. They've got the 3 stripes on the right shoulder, and they don't have the Adidas 3 stripes down the sleeve.
And are these for the crew kit specifically, or in general?
These are supposedly it's all of them. Everybody is going to get a plain jersey with 3 stripes. It'll be the one I saw was a white kit for LA Galaxy.
That's the one I saw too. It had the old '96 logo.
Yeah, it's got the '96 logo, and then it's got 3 stripes on the shoulder. Yep. And then it did not have the leak I saw did not have the Herbalife thing on their front chest, which is, inherently problematic. It could mean that Herbalife is finally being cut away, but that was a big pile of money for the giant pyramid scheme that they were running. So I don't know what that says about Herbalife right now.
I mean, Herbalife has their own set of issues, and I've always been interested in
being one of them.
Yeah, mainly that. I mean, what is the word, or at least for the crew, on who the new kit sponsor is going to be?
There's weird rumors swirling around that Acura is no longer the kit sponsor, to the point where it was very telling that when Aiden Morris was announced yesterday, that the picture they put up cuts just underneath the crew badge. Now, this could be that they're just using an old kit that's around, and they don't want to show off a new, or
it still says Barbasol on it.
Right. It could also be him holding up his old Academy jersey, which is a possibility. I have no idea. The other thing, and there are conflicting rumors on this, is that Acura is not going to be the jersey sponsor, that they are going to probably take on some sort of other sponsorship within it, and I kind of hope they do, or at least their parent company does, and that it could be one of dozens of other local businesses. Everything I'm hearing is that it's local, that everything they're trying to do over the next couple of years is local. The businesses, the restaurants inside the new stadium are local. You're not going to have Papa John's Pizza, hopefully. And in the stadium,
that's just a good thing in general, because nobody
I don't like Papa John's.
Nobody is like.
Nobody is clamoring for Papa John's.
Nobody's choosing Papa John's. You get Papa John's.
And there are so many great local, even if you go for a local chain, there is a local pizza chain in Donato's. There's also local, regional pizza things that you could go more regional in terms of food, where you could have Mikey's Late Night Slice.
Maybe that's what we should do. We should try and do hey, let's host a contest for who's going to be the crew pizza sponsor, and we'll have all of them come in. We'll try all of their pizzas, and we'll report back to the front office, being like, hey, we let fans come in. We'll try them out. We'll have a bunch of people over.
Yeah.
We'll have some pizza. We'll try them all out, and let the fans decide who should bring in on that one. It's eating pizza. What's what's less complicated than that?
I don't know how much Melissa does on that.
That part's true right now.
But I mean, there are very large local businesses. Wendy's has always been one of those companies that has a very tenuous relationship with the crew. They eliminated their sponsorship in 2017 when it came to, like, they were the hamburger sponsor or some local restaurant sponsor for the crew.
Because they're local, but they're not really local.
Right. But I mean, they are local. They're headquartered in Dublin.
Yeah.
Dave Thomas put the first one in downtown,
Yep.
3 miles away from the new stadium. But they cut ties as a result of Anthony Precourt. Also, you're looking at Chipotle's headquarters is now in Columbus.
Yep.
White Castle is directly behind the new Crew Stadium, and they are building a bridge that quite literally goes from their office campus to the stadium. That is one of the bridges that bridges the river to the new stadium. So you will be able to walk from Upper Arlington and Grandview Heights past the White Castle headquarters to the new stadium via a lovely footbridge. It'll be great. Do I think they'll be the jersey sponsor? No. I think they'll go with a more international company. If I looked into the crystal ball and made a better thought on it, it's either one of 2 companies. It's either Nationwide or it's Honda.
Honda owns Acura, so that would be.
But straight up Honda, not Acura.
That would basically be more of a logo switch than an actual.
Change. Would I love for us to go back to Barbasol and that's the other thing is we can have 2 sponsors now.
Yeah, you can do a front and a back, can't you?
You can do the jersey front, and you can now do a sleeve sponsor. And as a result of a federal court case, it can now be alcohol. I don't think you can do tobacco, because I don't think you can put R.J. Reynolds on anything right now. But it's kind of more like what the NBA has done with the
Goodyear.
Yeah, the Cavs have the Goodyear logo on their sleeve. I imagine that it'll probably be an international company, Honda, Acura, Nationwide, or the oft-rumored just straight-up Columbus partnership, which is the partnership of all of the richest people it's the Justice League of Money.
Yeah, the richest Crew fans in Columbus.
And they essentially bought the team as it is, so
Jimmy helped.
Jimmy helped. Alex Fisher did amazing things for saving the Crew.
Yeah, the Columbus partnership did the work.
Right. They had to convince the money bag.
Yeah, they did the work, and then Jimmy was like, I love Columbus for this much. And it's setting up to be a very interesting season. Circling back, I think they've got a shot at winning the East.
I do think.
For sure. I think they have a shot at being the top seed in the East. DC doesn't really scare me. Atlanta definitely.
That Ola is back and looks to be in good form.
That's true. But Atlanta doesn't scare me.
They just
Toronto. Toronto. Michael Bradley's a year older. Josie Altidore is a year older.
I have no idea who their goalie even is right now.
Yeah, they're. I feel like
NYCFC is the only team that truly scares me.
Yeah, they're the only ones that give me pause.
Sean Johnson is very good goalie.
Yeah, and Red Bulls Red Bulls don't really scare me anymore.
They cut ties with so many players. I know BWP is not the same player he was, and he is not the same as his father was at that age. But BWP should be playing. They should have made an arrangement for him to stay with Red Bulls. There's no reason he should be on the open market. And I think
has he found a team yet?
No. BWP and Derek Etienne both were released by the Red Bulls organization, and I'm convinced that the reason that they're still free agents is because the CBA has not been negotiated. Because nobody will know what they can put.
Yeah, they have no idea how he'll count towards them. Especially
because there are weird rumors that some of the lower I don't want to say lower I do want to say low. No, I don't want to say lower income. That just sounds rude. The lower spending ownership groups, investment groups in MLS want to solve the DP spot situation, where they were the ones that levied towards eliminating the fourth DP, which had only existed for I think a year or 2 years at that point, and that led to the insanity of the Galaxy last season, where they were going the day before the season started. They still had 4 DPs on their books.
Yeah.
And Ola had been bought down, and so they technically should have been a 5 DP team.
Near as I can tell, here's how the MLS CBA structure works. They have their rules.
Yes.
And then LA
does whatever they want.
Wants to do something, and then they change the rule. And then everybody gets to do it.
Yeah, that's the DP rule is called the Beckham rule, because they wanted David Beckham, and they had a sort of a salary cap. It's not really a salary; it's a spending cap, really, because it doesn't go always towards salary. It also goes to splitting up transfers. It also goes towards, you can use it on academies and coaches, because you can technically trade coaches, which is I'm still fascinated by. And they had agreed on it when there was only 3 guys that owned the league. When the owner of the Galaxy, whose name I just completely blanked on, and the Hunt family and New England were the only.
It's always the Crafts. The Crafts are always somehow involved.
Well, the Crafts only had themselves. They didn't take a second team, despite the fact he could have. And it was shockingly the richest owners in the league that said, hey, we have to set boundaries on ourselves. And that's, they contracted to, 10 teams or something, and now there's going to be 30 starting next season. Or 2 seasons from now.
I mean, say what you want about the MLS being a Ponzi scheme. Like, you can't deny that, 1, it has worked, and 2, some of these stadiums aren't sold out, but they're not empty. These stadiums are not empty. Crew Stadium, for all the grief that Crew fans have gotten regarding attendance, they
suffers from,
there was legitimate and serious growth in attendance last year, just from one season to the next.
The Crew is the only team that grew in double digits in the league.
It's amazing what happens when you actually try to get people to come to the games.
But they also doubled their marketing budget. I see more marketing. I was at the Blue Jackets game we're recording this on Wednesday, on Tuesday night against the Bruins, and there were standalone ads in downtown for the new Crew Stadium for, get your tickets now. They're seeing season ticket growth still right now. Like, there should be. Does it plateau? Hopefully not. Were they smart on the size of the stadium that they've announced? Yeah, it's a little bit smaller than the existing Crew Stadium, which is okay, because we've also added luxury items in a way that, we've given up space on some of the lower end tickets, and the possibility of having, a bar and restaurants and comfortable seats and bathrooms and, important things that don't exist at existing Crew Stadium.
Yeah, and part of it's the age of the stadium.
The erector set.
Yeah, and I feel like, yes, they were the first soccer-specific stadium, and that's cool. But that's pretty much it. Like, just being the first in this particular case is not working for us as a club. The stadium was in a crummy location to begin with, because their options were build a new stadium or don't have a team.
Right.
And we don't have to suffer through that anymore. We can take our time. We've got our stadium site. Are there critics? Sure, they can all go kick rocks. Right. But we got this. We fought for this, and we're making it happen. And I am so excited for what's coming up this season. And we're coming up on about an hour and 20 now. And the biggest thing I've noticed, even from last year to this year, is just the money that is getting tossed around. by these clubs now. Is it anywhere on the level of what the NBA or the NFL is throwing around? No, but comparison to the last year, let alone the last 10 years.
Right.
That club
2016 season, the league spent, I think it was $6 million on transfers. We are 14 days into
Columbus Crew spent more than that
this season
on one player.
Right. We are 14 days into the transfer window, and counting everything, the league has spent $64 million. So $6 million to $64 million in 5 years. That's nuts.
And I mean, and if you're listening to this and you're thinking, wow, that is a lot of money. In grand scheme, it's not. It's not close to what the other four major sports are spending, and it's not close to what any other developed country league is spending.
Right.
Liga MX is still outspending the MLS.
And they're cutting down on that.
Yeah.
Their owners are starting to lose piles of money.
Yeah, but I mean, they were spending it and they're
Right.
putting it out there. I mean, when you look at the transfer fees that get thrown around in Europe, it is just ridiculous. I love talking to non-soccer following friends and explaining the economics of the game.
Yeah.
Especially the American ones, because you're like, so that's way more like, economically speaking, way more American than anything we see here. Like, it's way more free market capitalist overseas than anything you see domestically, and that's from those dirty socialists over in Europe.
Right, and we had leagues in the past that have spent like that. The 70s NASL, when we had Pele and half the Colombian national team and Brazilian World Cup players playing in New York, and the indoor soccer league in the late 80s was spending was having salary caps of 10 and 15 million. This is indoor leagues.
This is in the 80s, too.
Yeah, this is the 80s, too. And we had clubs that burned themselves out trying to do that. We had entire leagues in the United States that burned themselves out because they were trying to compete with Europe. Pele made more in a year playing for the Cosmos, supposedly, than several MLS teams paid for their entire salary cap last season. And it's the reason Pele is so well known in the U.S. There are documentaries on why he's so famous that, it was a word of mouth. And, okay, he won the World Cup and he cost $60 million. He must be incredible then. And that we suffered that same problem with Freddie Adu. Freddie Adu in the U.S.
Freddie.
Cost a lot of money to go to England, and it was, yay, how outstanding is this? And then he faltered, and suddenly, like, if Freddie Adu succeeded in Europe, we don't have to put so much on Christian Pulisic.
Now, how old is Freddie now?
Freddie, I think, is like, he's in his early 30s.
I feel like he's about the same age as us, and yeah, I mean, I remember when he got that professional contract with DC United at like 15.
Yeah, he was the youngest player signed in American history. And then he had sponsor. I think he had like a Nike or Adidas or Reebok sponsorship while he was still in the academy. He was in. There are old stories about him in the U.S. Soccer national team development academy thing that they set up in Florida, and he was there with Stu Holden. He was there with Michael Bradley, and where these guys are in college and they're have full beards and they're grown adults. He's 12.
Yeah, and I just look. He's 30, so he's the same age as my younger brother.
Right.
And looking through his resume, he is certainly a well-traveled young man.
He's in Vegas. He's doing okay.
We'll put it. Yeah, he's living in Vegas now after being all over Europe for a while. But yeah, just the money these clubs are spending, and
they're also not spending a lot of money because they're, shockingly, you look at these crazy fees. Zelarayan's a $7 million transfer, and he'll probably be $1.5 million a year contract, and we have his contract till 2020 or 2023 or something. And at the same time, we also signed Aiden Morris, who is a homegrown. And so many teams are relying on their homegrowns that when you look into numbers like the possible $10 million transfer for Chicharito to LA, you're also looking at they have 3 academy kids coming up, or FC Dallas is selling an academy kid for $2 million, and that's one of the things that they want with the new, like the lower spending owners are wanting the DP contract to you have. The proposal is you have 2 DPs as we currently use them, where you're spending a pile of money. You're getting Chicharito, you're getting Zlatan, you're getting Rooney. But the third one, if you want to use a third one, they have to be under a certain age and under a certain amount. And the idea on that one is you're bringing in the best South American talent or the best African talent, and then you're selling them. The idea is the third spot will be a selling spot.
Basically that mid-level developmental spot. Where do you see, or what's the relationship between the MLS academies and the colleges going? Where is that headed? That seems to be.
I don't see the draft existing in 5 years. That's how I see it. I see the college system being used as a development, and you've heard people say it. Tim Bezbatchenko saying that he would like to bring it up a couple of players from that have been academy players that are currently college players, but if it means they're not going to get significant minutes, he would rather they stay at their colleges, and we could hold on to their rights or do whatever, but he'd rather they get playing time and develop than sit on a bench.
And how is that working now? Because like Aiden Morris, we were talking about earlier, he played at Indiana for a year, but he's also an academy product.
Yeah. So
why does he not go into the draft, being an academy, even though
we own his rights? It's when you develop in the academy, you own that player's rights. Now you can waive them, or they can take a contract, as we saw in Chicago, where last season, where one of their academy kids petitioned, I think he petitioned either FIFA or US Soccer for out of the discovery rights in US Soccer for Chicago, and he went over to Europe.
So basically, he emancipated himself from his contract.
And so when he comes back to the U.S., will he? That's sort of unclaimed territory. Of will he automatically have to go back to Chicago? Which I think he should, because he's an academy product. It's different than like when Zach Steffen went from Maryland to go play in Germany, and then came back to the U.S. and his rights were gobbled up by the Crew. He wasn't a Philadelphia Union academy prospect. His rights didn't belong to an academy. The way that we haven't seen Sebastian Berhalter get signed by the Crew yet. He had a standout year at UNC. There's highlights of him doing incredible things where, movements that if Mbappe or Messi did it, they'd be blowing up and have a million views.
They'd be viral.
Right. And if Messi did the same thing when he was 19, and he did do the same thing, there's a great one where somebody passes it and it's kind of a long looping pass and he's in front of it and he rolls it down the back of his neck, off of his shoulder, onto the ground, and then dribbles forward. And that is a like a flair move that Messi or Mbappe did when they were 19 years old, and they would get 5 million views, and there'd be some crazy techno music behind it on YouTube, and people would be clamoring to say that they're the most talented technical player in the world. And because it was Sebastian Berhalter that did it, it doesn't come across in the same way. Did he do that every game? No, he did that on some games. But what are you asking an 18-year-old to do?
Yeah. And so how does it work out then when you send these kids off to college? Because I feel like
it's sort of a loan.
I'm not
It's
gonna lie.
loan,
I feel like
half
the reason they send them off to college is probably because the kids' parents want them to go to college,
and they help them get into better colleges. They help them develop scouting videos, and it's a heck of a lot easier for like when the U15s or the U17s are at a tournament in Florida or New Mexico or something, that for for North Carolina or Wake Forest or UCLA to just send a scout to that training camp or that tournament, and you go, okay, here's a list, make a list of the best 5 midfielders at this all MLS Academy tournament that we watch out, and then after the tournament's over, you then ring up your good friend who you maybe played on the national team or whatever, and you say, hey, I really like so and so, I would like to see them. This is Danny O'Rourke calling the crew and saying, hey, I need 2 good defensive midfielders and a winger. Yeah, we've got 2 defensive midfielders and a winger. So you help them develop scholarships and do that. And it sounds a little bit more toward like in basketball this happens.
It sounds like AAU.
Yeah, it's basketball. You get AAU, you get that, but there's piles of money. It's not friendship being traded. So far, we haven't had a situation where you straight up hear, about some Division I soccer school paying an MLS team, and I'm sure it's happened. Paying.
Oh, I mean, it's put it this way. And that definitely happens in AAU.
Right.
In AAU basketball, that happens constantly. Or it'll be like, it's not usually the coach. It's usually the kid's dad. It's the kid's parents who get paid like $100,000 to be a consultant on this team, when really it's you're the kid of the best player on the team, and if you want to showcase your talent, and if you want to maintain your if you want to maintain your reputation
and your relationship with these coaches, because you get these situations where Danny O'Rourke is at Indiana, Akron's former head coach is now the head coach of the Crew, Brian Menzenoff is the head coach of OSU.
Brian McBride is the GM of US Soccer.
Right. It's soccer has been a closed friendship. Like, it's a series of friendships developed over the years. And you see these situations where players from the 94 team or the 98 team or the 2002 team, their names keep popping up in situations in U.S. soccer because you know everybody else involved.
Soccer is a much more like intangibly based game than I would say any of the 4 major American sports are. Like, I feel like I can look at some, back in the day when we had the baseball cards or the football cards, I feel like I could look at someone's numbers on the back of their card and know whether or not they were a good player.
Right.
I can't say that about soccer. You can't look at someone's numbers and just be like, yeah, that kid can play. No, that kid can't play. Like, you really have to get in and see them in action, and then have an understanding of how this cog can fit into your machine. And the only way you can pass that information along is through people who understand your machine.
Yeah.
If you're that middleman, if you are those MLS Academy clubs.
Stats don't make sense or don't matter. Like, if you told most U.S. soccer fans that Jossie Zardes is statistically the best striker in U.S. soccer last season, they would strike you heavily. They would hit you very hard.
And it would be deserved.
Well, because some people don't like Jossie's style, but he has the most goals.
Yeah.
He has, the most assists of any of the strikers. His play is what Berhalter wants. It's what, I remember seeing somebody on Twitter ask, why the hell is Jossie Zardes called up? And somebody responded, and it was a commentator responded with, he can help teach Josh Sargent what Greg wants him to teach.
That's exactly why he's there.
Right, and the response was 100 people saying, what is it that Jossie Zardes can teach Josh Sargent that he can't learn in Europe? And it's what Greg wants. It's the little things. It's the behavior that Greg wants. It's the how he wants his strikers to go in. It all depends on what they want really in their system, but you get into situations where stats don't matter. Like you said, it's the intangibles.
I remember when David Beckham first came to LA, and like one of the biggest criticisms from I'll say from American LA fans, was that like, oh, he doesn't score any goals. He doesn't score very many goals. I'm like, that was never David Beckham's game. That was never what made scoring goals is not what people remember David Beckham for. Ironically, being a soccer player isn't what people remember David Beckham for.
And there are players that are like that. There are players that are so good at fitting a situation. Like, there's a reason that Miguel Almiron went for such an incredible amount, and now he is the best player on his team. It's because he could make a decision. And yes, he has a lot of assists, and he has really good goals. But he makes decisions. He plays. It's the little things. It's his decision to take a step to the left instead of to the right puts him into a play. And those are the things that a high-level coach looks at. How many U.S. soccer fans are high-level coaches that can decide the little intangibles that exist? And you get those situations where, like, okay, so Jossie isn't, exactly what everybody would want. But there are other players that have done that. Like, Johan Cruyff was not what the Dutch national team wanted at the time. But he is, a historically incredible player because he plays in a way that works for him. And what was great was the Ajax coach became the national team coach, and all of a sudden, Johan Cruyff is one of the top 5 greatest soccer players ever.
I mean, he's one of the top 5 soccer minds,
right?
To ever grace the pitch is in Johan Cruyff. I mean, the 4-3-3 is
somebody's mind.
Yeah, I mean, the 4-3-3 formation is essentially a thing because of Johan Cruyff. Whether it's the 3 forwards or sort of like the hybrid midfield or fullback position, that formation, the breaking away from the 4-4-2 essentially, exists because of Johan Cruyff. And the United States has never had that, and we're starting, and I'm trying to get back to the ground level. We're starting to see a team identity with Columbus Crew SC, and
I think that's where having Brian McBride in will help, because if he is helping Greg to set a pattern of play, and he has these relationships with other coaches, Brian McBride can go to these coaches and go, hey, I know what it's like playing in MLS. I know what it's like. Yeah, he doesn't have executive experience or coaching experience in MLS, or I don't think at all. But he can say, hey, do us this favor, and I know you're teaching a 4-4-2. Can you teach your center backs how to do this? Can you teach we need a left back that's American. Can you help to teach a left back how to do this thing? And so you'll get into a situation where an MLS team might develop a player and they end up on the national team, and you go, that player's not very good, until they get placed into a situation or plugged into a role where you go, oh, they're incredible. And you might see that. We might see that in the U20s or the U23s. I think there's a U20 player right now that's on the national team that doesn't currently have a team, and it's just because he's been coached up well enough.
I feel like that was kind of the goal with Landon Donovan.
Yeah.
Was that he was going to be that guy that they sort of
rolled out and as the ambassador for please help us make this team better.
Yeah, because he played in England. Obviously he had plenty of years with the Galaxy. Did he ever play in Europe, or was he just in England?
I think it was just England.
So
and then he played in Mexico.
Yeah, and then he went on and played in Mexico. But I think he basically
and indoor.
Yeah, he spent time in essentially the birthplace of the game, grasped its meaning, understood that meaning, came back, and was he the captain of the national team?
Yeah.
So, and basically led the American team with the understanding of what the game. Basically, he was the one who explain and show what the game meant to people. And that is the biggest hurdle that MLS and U.S. Soccer still have to clear, and that it's also the first hurdle, and that is relevance.
And there you get these situations where one of the most common phrases you hear is, oh, the best athletes aren't playing soccer in the U.S.
I do still feel that's true, but
I don't think LeBron is one of the best athletes in the world.
I don't
think he could play soccer.
Yeah, it's one of those. I do think our best athletes.
Chad Johnson could play soccer.
Yeah, I do think our best athletes are not being pushed towards soccer. However, I don't honestly know how much that helps you. No. I really don't, because soccer is so much more of a cerebral game. I don't want to say it's cerebral, but more of a chemistry based game than any. The closest one I would get to now I would say would either be basketball. Well, actually no, I'd say hockey. It'd be hockey.
Yeah.
Because basketball, as we've seen, you can, as long as you've got 3 really talented players, your team's gonna contend. If you've got 3 really talented players, your team's going to be contending for a title every year. You definitely can't say that in soccer.
No.
And you definitely cannot say that in hockey. The rosters are just too big. And baseball, you can get away with it too.
A good pitcher can win everything.
Yeah. But even baseball can be a very cerebral game, especially in the National League. But soccer, you don't. There's no. The big thing is there's no timeouts. There's Americans. I feel like we like to.
And that's one of the problems with the college game is there are timeouts and exchange.
Yeah, we Americans like to take time to strategize.
Yeah.
And formulate a plan and then execute. We like to brainstorm, make a plan, sell the plan, roll out the plan, execute the plan, and then blow it all up when the plan fails.
And
so
much of that has led to other weird situations. We complicated the game of soccer sometimes.
Oh, we have definitely done that. Though
we did create the substitution rules.
Oh, for the 3 subs, and that was, I did not know that was us.
The United States. Though we also at the same time were trying to do a thing where there was a penalty box instead of red cards, which is just too complicated.
That also sounds like something we would do. But it's such more of a cerebral game. I don't think just having better athletes would necessarily make it better, because I think.
Because you look at, El Duce is not an incredible athlete, but he's an incredible soccer mind.
Yeah. And I think, by that same token, you're going to, because we're Americans, we're always going to want to take the best athletes. You're going to lose the El Duces. You're going to lose some of those minds, and it's just going to become who can follow the coach's need and understanding. Again, it comes back to, what are we trying to do? Are we trying to develop good players, or are we trying to win games?
Right.
And at that level,
Mexico is trying to win games.
Yeah. at that level, and you will lose that aspect of it if you go too far in the opposite direction.
Correct.
I don't think LeBron could have played soccer. I'll be honest with you.
He's
don't.
too big.
He's too big. But someone like
Patrick Mahomes, I think, could have been an incredible soccer player. He's very quick on his feet. He moves. He scrambles. He throws things, which is not very helpful for soccer. But, I mean, like you saw that in Chad Johnson. Chad Johnson went to college on a soccer scholarship. His rights were technically owned by some...
Are we talking Ocho Cinco?
Okay.
Okay.
Cinco, yeah. And so he had a full tryout at the height of his career with the Bengals. He had a full tryout with the Kansas City Wiz.
I remember that.
He damn near made the team. Now he makes his living as a semi-professional FIFA player. Because he loves soccer. He just also happens to be 6'5" and 200 and something odd pounds, and he can catch very well.
Yeah, I think someone like sticking in the same vein. I think someone like a Calvin Johnson, and he had
been a weird player to see on the field.
He's
a very big dude.
He's a big dude, but I think he would obviously be in a different shape because he's playing a completely different sport. But
I think he'd been a great goalie. Imagine Calvin Johnson as a goalie.
He could have been a great goalie. He could have been a great center back. He would have made a great target man. Basically, think of his game as a wide receiver and how that translates to being a target man in soccer. And the body control and just wanting to get yourself in position to be there. I think he would have been a great target man.
Oh my gosh, if Cam Newton was a target man or a center back, he can take contact. We've seen, but that's one of those things that woulda, coulda, shoulda. But also, I don't particularly want. I don't want the best. I want the best athletes to pick their best sport. And you get into weird situations where you always hear oh, Wayne Gretzky's this amazing hockey player, but he was an even better lacrosse player. Those are situations where it's different. You make a choice. John Elway, I mentioned earlier. John Elway was an incredible quarterback. He was also a heck of a great center fielder. He played college baseball, and every good quarterback is drafted in baseball at the same time because they'll take the risk. They have 115 odd rounds of the draft.
Yeah. Take a stab at it, see what happens.
Yeah, and so you get these great moments where Deion Sanders played baseball. Deion Sanders could have played... If Deion Sanders played football and soccer at the same time, soccer would be the second most popular sport.
I remember Deion Sanders is still the only person to ever start a NFL football game and a World Series baseball game on the same day.
Took a helicopter to do it.
On the same day.
Yep.
And I think the era of the two-sport professional athlete, that's over. That's never going to happen again. And I think the era of the two-sport college athlete is on its way out as well.
Well, yeah, because now you're getting teams that are getting a little cranky when a player is playing, particularly the baseball-football thing, because it's similar mechanics. It's also running and throwing based, catching. It takes similar muscle groups, similar mindset. So you have these situations where these top quarterbacks are having to make a decision. There was a quarterback, I think it was on Oklahoma or something a couple years ago, where his coach said, "Hey, you have to quit playing baseball. I don't have time for you to be going and doing baseball practice. I need you doing this." And I'm probably saying the wrong school. And the player had to make a decision I am an incredible baseball player. I'm also an incredible football player and an incredible student. One of these things is disappearing from my life.
And I think I would say soccer is kind of like the floor of that. Right. That's kind of what's forcing this change. Because if you look, the NBA is slowly turning into the European soccer model. If you look at their business models, especially, honestly, the most obvious sign of it is how this thing with China has just blown up in their face. Yeah. Again, they are trying, like soccer, they are trying to become that worldwide.
And the problem is you're getting when you get to these higher end athlete salaries and you're getting players that are making $60 million a year, you're having to get in bed with ownership groups that you have to make ethical decisions. When you look at, Wolverhampton Wanderers right now,
Wolves Club de Portugal.
well, they are an incredible team. They are owned by a Chinese oligarch. You know, the who is it? The New Jersey Nets in NBA.
Brooklyn. Yeah, Joe Tsai. They're owned by a Taiwanese
They're owned
billionaire.
by a Taiwanese businessman. The Mavericks are owned by essentially the Chinese government.
Are they? No, that's the Mavericks. Sorry, fact check. The Mavericks are still owned by Mark Cuban.
Oh, Houston. That's who it is. Houston is essentially owned by like the Chinese government.
Is that might be why? Again, I don't know. If, I have not heard that one either.
Who did Yao Ming play for?
Yeah, that was Houston. But it was that might have been why they had the issues too. Houston. It was the Houston GM that tweeted out the support for Hong Kong, and that might have been why you had everybody backtracking and falling down, because that's essentially who.
But you're having that situation with there's a couple of Premier League.
We probably need to fact check on that one on who actually owns the Houston Rockets.
Yeah, there's Premier League players that are starting to make statements regarding Hong Kong and China and Iran, and you're getting into situations where there are teams that are owned by the Qatari government.
City Sports Ventures.
Right, and you're getting into a situation where, like, Qatar is currently blockaded by Saudi Arabia. And what Saudi sheikh owns what team. So what team will no longer be able to take certain players because they've made statements saying, like, hey, I don't support a blockade. Like, not to get super into politics on this, but you get into situations where you have to make... There are questions regarding the ethics of certain teams because you're getting into situations where you've got like $100 million transfer fee for a player, and who's paying $100 million? Who has $100 million to take Mbappe, or who has $80 million to give Juventus for a goalkeeper that's 40 years old? As much as I liked him, $80 million is a lot for a 40-year-old.
The two best teams, best might be relevant. Oh, no, I think it's still true. The two best teams in both the Premier League and MLS are owned by the Deputy Prime Minister of Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
City Sports Ventures is owned by Sheikh Mansour, who is the Deputy Prime Minister of Saudi Arabia.
They also own 5 other teams.
Yeah.
And so you get into situations where would you rather the deputy prime minister of some country owns a team, or would you rather, the prime minister of a team owns it in the case of when Berlusconi owned AC Milan? Or do you want, some random situation where you've got a questionable connection with an agent where, there's these Portuguese teams.
Wolverhampton Wanderers.
Right, where was it 20 players?
It was like their manager and like half the team all have the same agent.
And so what's the ethical line? That's one of the things that's always been kind of interesting about MLS is, for the most part, with the exception of like NYCFC and New York Red Bulls, you can put a face on who owns certain things.
Yeah, that part is very true. There is, at most of the MLS clubs, for all intents and purposes, are domestically owned.
And even the ones that aren't domestically owned, you can still put sort of a face to who owns that. How much is there's somebody you can blame when something goes wrong.
Yeah.
Kroenke, you can blame him.
And do we blame him?
There's 100,000 investors in his company, LeBron being one of them. So all of them technically own, the Colorado Rapids, but they also technically own Arsenal. And, the Rams and name 15 other organizations. They own like businesses, but because they've invested in his company. What's better? One very rich person owns a team, or 10,000 random people own a team.
I don't.
How many of them have ethical problems?
Yeah, I mean, it does give you that aspect. It is just very interesting to see how the game is going on the world stage. I think we were talking about this a little bit before the show. It's like NBA and world soccer are essentially converging on the same business model,
right,
from completely opposite starting locations.
And you're starting to see basketball players get deep, like I just said with LeBron, get deeply involved in soccer.
Because, like, remember, the NBA was at the top of the market in the world game. And more importantly,
flashy.
And more importantly, at the top of the market in the domestic game too. Did the NFL make more money? Yes, but the NBA also played way more games. So just from an overall exposure standpoint, you're watching more basketball.
It's also easier to export the game of basketball to the Sudan, to Sri Lanka, to Cameroon. There are these amazing European players, and there's a European basketball league. The Greek league is always one of those ones of like, oh, you didn't get drafted by the NBA, go play for $1 million for some, Greek olive.
Yeah, Rick Pitino coached there for 2 years after he got forced out at Louisville, rightfully so. But yeah, he
don't take money, children.
Yeah, but he went over and coached at Olympiacos, who is historically like the New York Yankees of Greek basketball. But he went over there, coached 2 years, and now he's coming back. He resigned there. He's hoping maybe he can land another NBA job. We'll see. I don't see that, but he's got that opportunity now. And I think the biggest difference in why the NBA cannot stay up with FIFA's business model currently is because the rest of the domestic leagues aren't there. They're not there yet. Yeah. Spain is getting there. I mean, you've seen with Luka Doncic playing
Latvia is starting to get there.
Yeah.
Not really. Israel is actually really good at the women's level. There's incredible women's basketball being played in like Israel and Turkey.
But you're finally starting to see, and you could argue the internet, social media, etc., is the biggest beneficiary and proponent of this. That
NBA social media is so much better than everybody else.
Yeah, you're starting to see the development of basketball around the world, but domestically we're starting to see the development and the exposure of soccer development here due to the same thing. Again, the NBA is at the top of the game here. Meanwhile, the MLS is at the bottom of the game domestically, and they're converging on the same business model.
Right.
So both of these leagues and these industries really. Both of these industries, the powers that be, whomever is ultimately really calling the shots and running things, both see the same thing. They're both headed towards the same point in what they're trying to build.
And other soccer leagues around the world, like there's a report that came out, or a story that came out in England, where if they did the math, it actually, like, having a closed-door game is not a punishment to some of these Premier League teams, that they make so much. Manchester United and Liverpool, based on all of the money they make on other things, essentially don't need anybody to come to games. That you could actually save money for some of these clubs if they didn't have to pay people to the police to be there.
Oh, they've completely sold out to television.
Right.
Completely.
Their TV rights and their sponsorships and their all that are worth so much money now that it doesn't matter if anybody comes.
No, they have completely sold out to television, and that's why there was that talk maybe last year about basically 20 clubs from across UEFA just say, no, we're not going to play in the Champions League.
Yeah.
We're not going to play in the Champions League. We're going to formulate our own.
The European Super League.
Yeah, then we're going to
been a threat for 20 years.
And it's back up there again, and it's kind of one of those. This is clearly I'm getting far more conspiratorial than I normally get here, but that's okay. This is clearly the people who run the sponsorship and have the money trying to hoard it.
And also, there are teams in leagues that the rest of the league is garbage. And, if PSG didn't have to play in their French opponents, I think they would be so much happier. If Celtic or Rangers didn't have to play the rest of the Scottish League, they could save themselves so much time if they just played in a Super League or the Champions League. There are leagues where it doesn't matter what the domestic league occurs.
Ukraine
Juventus is going to win the Italian league. One of 3 teams is winning the Turkish league. One of 3 teams is winning the Portuguese league. Scotland is always Celtic now.
Yeah. So Ukraine's that way too. It's either Dynamo Kiev or what's the other one? Shakhtar. It's either of those two, no matter what in the Ukraine. And it's an interesting dynamic as watching the U.S. I mean, and that we're about to celebrate 25 years, and we are
a better business model than the rest of the world.
Yeah,
there's parity here.
Yeah, we're about to find out. We're about to find out if put it this way, spending's not going to go down anytime soon. It's not going down. It is this spending spree in soccer is only going in one direction. And we're about to find out if our model can really compete with the Anglo snobs and the Euro snobs. We're about to really find that out because now we've got a league, and now for the most part we've got money.
Yeah, and also
we've got a new CBA up, so we're about to decide what is our business model. How are we going to do this?
We are also going to kind of profit from a couple of other leagues in CONMEBOL and CONCACAF making the decision to restrict how they do some things. Mexico saying you can't have this many foreign players. China saying you can't spend this much money on foreign players. We want Chinese players to make more money. Or the Japanese league, you have to have a certain number of Japanese players on the field now. So you're getting these situations where like Liga MX was just bringing in Chilean players and Colombian players and Argentinian players. And oh crap, now we can't have that many. So MLS is buying, and we'll make a little bit of money off of that, and MLS will make some money. And maybe if there's a 22-year-old Colombian winger who's really good that somebody picks up off of I don't know, not Tigres, but Club America. Club America then goes, we get 10% when you sell them to Europe, and all of a sudden an MLS team sells some Colombian player. Atlanta maybe sells to PSG and for $12 billion, and $1 million goes to Club America. Well, that's an extra $1 million on top of the $6 million that they already paid. They were paid for them, so hey, they've just made $7 million. Didn't really have to do anything.
Exactly. And if there's one thing we can say, as we're going to go ahead and wrap things up here, money talks, BS walks, and if you are nothing else, we are always open for business. So thanks for hanging out with us today. This has been episode 2 of the Crew Corner podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard, be sure to comment on the video, like the video, share it, get this out to Crew fans. We're going to be doing all sorts of new stuff as we head on into the season. We're about to actually go ahead and figure out our assignments for game coverage for this season. But again, let us know what you guys want to hear. We are Crew fans. We talk the Crew. We talk a little bit of everything, as we found out on this show today, and that's all right too. So, but as we're signing off, my name is Matt.
And I'm AJ.
We'll see you in the next video.